Set 10 has been out for almost a week now, and the meta is slowly starting to settle, so I'll run through my tier list of the best comps, and then show you my strategy for climbing, as well as how to play each comp. Looking at the tier list, in S tier, we have mostly reroll comps. Jazz Reroll with Misfortune carry is by far the strongest and most consistent comp. The downside is that it's almost contested by somebody else, which makes it hard to play, as you won't always hit the needed 3 stars. But it's a comp you can consistently hard force if you're not contested. Annie Reroll took a bit of time to surface since her itemization is strange due to how the emote trait works, as well as the free item you get from Superfan. The comp is very strong, but it has a weaker cap in the endgame, and results in a ton of top 4s, but I see this comp struggle to win games. But the sheer consistency of the comp being able to top 4 puts it in S tier. Samira Reroll is probably borderline A tier, but with a country opener, this comp is easily S tier. It has a ton of power with both MF and Urgot as a carry, and the country trait is incredibly powerful in both the early and mid game. This results in you usually having a ton of time to slow roll for the 3 stars you need. The last S tier comp is Big Shot Legendaries. I feel it's a bit cheap to place this in S tier, as a comp that is so heavily reliant on legendaries will almost always be S tier due to the amount of expensive units, but it's still worth mentioning as it's the best comp to play if you're able to get to level 9 and 10. Moving on to A tier, Crowd Diver Katarina is incredibly powerful. I've gotten a ton of first places with this comp, but I've also gotten too many bot 4s to place it in S tier. I'll get more into this during the comp's overview section, but in short, you need the best in slot items for Katarina, as well as a strong frontline, in addition to strong Z items to consistently top 4 and win games, and it's hard to pull off in every game. The other A tier comp is Pentakill Karthus. There are a couple of variations of this comp, where sometimes you reroll Mordekaiser and run him as the main carry with Karthus secondary carry, and sometimes you run Karthus and Viego as duo carries. The comp lacks a bit of consistency as Karthus has a floor or power he needs to reach in order to be effective, and it's a bit hard to consistently pull off, therefore this comp doesn't make S tier. In B tier we have Disco Dazzler TF. This comp is very strong, but it's a bit too inconsistent to be higher than B tier. It's also harder to play, but I have seen some top players that have already reached Masters Plus almost exclusively play this comp. So it's still a very strong comp, but it's very hard to pull off. In other words, don't play this comp unless you know what you're doing. KDA Ari has also been a good comp, but it's very contested as both Annie Reroll and Pentakill Karthus will use the units for this comp. And since the comp is not powerful, it's hard to argue for playing this comp when you can just pick one of the others. But if you are able to get Ari and Akali 2-star with a lot of KDA champs, then you are in a solid spot to both top 4 and win games. Lastly, we have Jinx Reroll. This is a very consistent top 4 comp, especially if you are able to get Punk and Headliner Jinx early. But that's the major downside with this comp, as you have to have Headliner Jinx to play it, which won't happen in most games. You can also hard force the comp and roll until you find her as the headliner, but that usually results in you not hitting fast enough, as well as taking too much damage before you 3-star her. My strategy for climbing has changed throughout the patch. In the beginning, I was almost exclusively hard forcing Jazz Misfortune every game. This worked well before the comp picked up too much steam, but once there was another person playing it in almost every single game, I started to bot 4 and had to switch up. In the early game, now I always try to force a Superfan opener. This is because now almost all S tier comps want this trait in their comp, and it's also just very strong in the early game when few people have items. This means I'm almost always trying to play some variation of a Lilia and Kennen opener, and then the other units I add in depends on my headliner. This sets me up for a much smoother mid game, especially once I hit a Nico, which is the 3rd Superfan unit that is played in almost every single comp right now. Something I also like to do is to pre-level to 4 if I haven't picked up a headliner yet. This is because the odds of hitting a 2-cost headliner is 20% there. Almost every 2-cost headliner will carry you in the early game and allow you to easily win streak. The only downside to this is that it will be hard to play 1-cost reroll comps as you've already spent money on XP, and you'll start to slow roll later if you do that. Let's also touch on the best augments, because the balance there is far from perfect, so we need to be aware of the best performing ones. Here is a quick overview of those, so make sure to look at these whenever you're picking augments. There's also a ton of augments that are underperforming, and these should almost always be avoided unless it's under very specific circumstances. All of these comps will be linked in an Imgur album that is available for patrons and YouTube members, and the links to join those are down in the description. First up is Misfortune Reroll. I have already made an in-depth guide on this comp, so I'll just briefly cover it here. This is a reroll comp that needs 3-star Misfortune to win. You'll get there by slow rolling at level 7 with this board, where the priority is 3-star MF, then 3-star Nico. The best headliner is any MF, but Bard can also work if you hit him early. As for items, you want to have Rageblade on MF and let her scale in the backline, and then we want 2 AD items to finish her build. And the best ones are Last Whisper, Deathblade, Giant Slayer, or IE. Note that Superfan gives her Deathblade, so only build 1 AD item if you have her as the headliner. Next up is Annie Reroll. With this comp, you need Annie as the headliner in the early game. Both Spellweaver and Emo work, and you will add an Amumu if you get Spellweaver headliner, and Lulu if you get Emo headliner. You will not level in the early game and wait until stage 3-1 before you roll. There, you will usually roll until you hit Annie 3-star, as well as finding 3 Superfan and 2 Emo. From there, you will add in more Spellweavers to round out the comp. Annie's items are very specific, so specific that you cannot run anything else to consistently perform well. She gets 1 Sojin from Superfan, and her other 2 items are Gnasher's Tooth and a second Sojin. With 2 Emo, Annie has 40 mana, and double Sojin allows her to only need 2 autos to cast. Gnasher's Tooth makes her perform those 2 autos incredibly fast, which makes this item active throughout the entire fight. Tank items go in Echo or Amumu, depending on who you find first. Next up is Samira Urgot Reroll. You will go for 3-star Samira and Urgot by slow rolling at level 7. Once you hit the 3 stars, push levels to 8, and look to add in a Guardian or a different unit based on your headliner. The best headliners are any of Samira and Urgot, and there are not really any others that work or are worth going for, especially since we have a lot of time to hit the preferred headliner when slow rolling with this comp. As for Samira items, she wants 3 AD items, and you'll pick 3 of IE, Last Whisper, Giant Slayer, Deathblade, Hurricane, Guardbreaker, and Hodge. Urgot wants 1 healing item, where the best one by far is BT, and the other 2 items want to be frontline AD items like Titans and Sterak's. You will prioritize items for whichever one of Samira and Urgot you get as your headliner, but note that Urgot's items are a lot more specific and less flexible, so be careful when using up many of its components for Samira items. Next up is Big Shot Legendaries. This comp is more focused on games when you're able to push to higher levels due to the amount of legendaries we need. The best headliner is Big Shot Jhin. Other headliners that are worth picking are Ezreal, Illaoi, Thresh, or Yorick. This board can also be adjusted. You can easily drop Misfortune and Lucian as they only give you 2 Jazz without any headliners. Generally, you want to add in more frontline to let Jhin and Ezreal scale up, or other units that help them cast faster or deal more damage. As for items on Jhin, we want 1 mana generating item and 2 damage items. The mana generating item wants to be Sojin, and the 2 AD items you build want to scale off the raw AD you get from Big Shot. Therefore, crit items like Last Whisper and IE are great, but also items like Deathblade, Guardbreaker, and Giant Slayer will work fine. Also, if you don't have any healing through your augments, then Hodge is great as an item as it gives a bit of healing. Tank items go on Illaoi or Yorick depending on who you find, and 2-star first. Next up is Crowd Diver Katarina. You will slow roll at level 6 for 3-star Katarina, and you also have to have Crowd Diver Katarina as the headliner for the comp to work. As for items, you want 3 crit items on Katarina. JG is the most important, so we burst champions with a spell crit. You can get Hodge from Superfan, and the 3rd item wants to be a second Hodge, almost all of the time. But you can also build Guardbreaker if there are a lot of shielding in the lobby and you have some healing augments. Tank items are incredibly important for this comp and should be prioritized after Katarina items. These will go on Nico. And then after that, build said items once your Katarina and tank items are sorted. Next up is Pentakill Karthus. This is one of the most consistent comps as it's not reliant on any legendaries, but it's very reliant on hitting Karthus 2-star with good items. The comp also runs a secondary carry, which is either Mordekaiser or Viego depending on your items. If you are running Mordekaiser, then you want to try and 3-star him. You will also drop Kayle here if you get a Pentakill headliner. As for items on Karthus, he wants 1 mana generating item and 2 AP items. The best mana item is Sojin, and the best AP items are JG, and then 1 raw AP item like Deathcap or Archangels, or a second crit item like Guardbreaker. Karthus gets Archangels for free if he has the headliner when Superfan is active. Viego wants 1 healing item, which is BT or Hodge, and then he wants melee AD items like Titans and Sterak's. You can also go double healing on Viego if you already have good damage. Viego gets Titans for free if he has the headliner. Mordekaiser wants Ionic Spark and then tank items, and he gets Crown Guard for free if he is the headliner. I will not cover the B tier comps, as I've already done so in my recent top 10 comps for set 10 video, and all of these comps will be in an Imgur album that is available for patrons and YouTube members, and the links to join those are down in the description. You can also check out a written version of this guide over on Tactor, or check out my profile to see more of the other content I've created on that platform. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you want cheat sheets for any of my comp guides, they're available for YouTube members and patrons, and the links to join those are down in the description. And if you want to get better at TFT, join the Discord. We got over 9,000 other players there who are hungry to climb. And if you want to get coached by me, the information is over on the Discord server as well. So take care and see you in the next video.